Elena's key struck the marble as Adrian raised a champagne glass to his mistress. Beneath the crystal chandeliers, 200 guests turned toward the sound. A string quartet faltered mid-waltz. One violin note hung thinly above the scent of white lilies and expensive cologne. Adrian stood beside Camille Hard at the foot of the staircase, one hand resting at her waist, the other displaying the engagement toast he had not yet finished. Camille's diamond threw shards of light across the room. Elena's wedding ring was already gone. "I'm glad you came," Adrian said, smiling with only his teeth. "It gives everyone closure." A few guests lowered their eyes. Others lifted their phones. Elena remained beside the marble table where she had set her evening bag, her fingertips touching its cool edge. She wore a black silk dress without jewelry, quiet among the emerald gowns and tailored tuxedos. Adrian tilted his glass toward her. "You always said this house needed life. Camille has finally given it some." Laughter moved through the ballroom in careful, brittle ripples. Camille's smile stayed polished. "Adrian," she murmured, not to stop him, but to make the cruelty appear spontaneous. He enjoyed the permission. Elena was never comfortable with celebrations, he continued. She preferred spreadsheets, contracts, all those dreary little details. Some people know how to build a home. Others only know how to occupy one. The lilies on the staircase trembled beneath the ventilation vents. Elena looked at the flowers, then at the pale rectangular mark on Adrian's wrist where his old watch had once rested. She had given him that watch before the first profitable year. Tonight, a platinum replacement gleamed there. "Was there a reason you asked me here?" she said. Her voice did not rise above the soft clink of crystal. Adrian glanced toward the guests, pleased to have been handed his final line. To make the transition clear, he crossed the marble floor and stopped close enough for Elena to smell cedarwood on his lapels. "This is Camille's home now." Behind him, Camille slowly extended her left hand as another camera flashed. Adrian's face hardened when Elena offered no argument, no tears, not even the humiliation he had arranged the room to witness. "Get out of my house," he said. The quartet went silent. Elena reached inside her bag. Adrian's gaze dropped, perhaps expecting a letter, perhaps the last plea he had rehearsed refusing. Instead, she removed a brass key on a narrow leather loop. She placed it beside the champagne tower with deliberate care. Metal touched stone. One clean note. "Of course," she said. Adrian's smile returned too quickly. He turned toward his guests, raising his glass as if he had won something. Elena took out her phone and selected a number, saved without name. Someone answered before the second ring. She watched Adrian slip his arm around Camille while the musicians waited for permission to resume. "It's me," Elena said. Her thumb rested against the smooth edge of the phone. Across the ballroom, Adrian laughed at something Camille whispered. Elena's eyes settled on the key between them. "Call it all off." Silence answered for half a heartbeat. Then the voice on the line said, "Everything." Elena lifted her gaze to the chandeliers. Their light reflected 100 times in the black windows. "Everything." She ended the call, picked up her coat, and walked toward the front doors. Behind her, Adrian tapped his glass, summoning the music back. He did not notice the first vibration inside his jacket. Then came another, and another. By the time Elena's hand closed around the cold brass door handle, phones were beginning to light up across the ballroom, and no one yet understood what she had just canceled. A low electronic chime cut through the first note of the orchestra. Then another sounded near the champagne tower, followed by a third beneath the chandeliers. Elena paused with the front door open, winter air slipping across her bare shoulders and carrying in the clean scent of snow. Behind her, Adrian pulled his phone from his jacket. The color left his face before the screen had finished loading. "What is this?" His voice landed sharply enough to silence the nearest guests. Across the ballroom, a banker lowered his champagne and stared at the message on his own device. Credit renewal authorization withdrawn. The signing scheduled for midnight, the one meant to keep Adrian's companies liquid through the next quarter, had been canceled. A second notification followed. The rescue transaction designed to absorb his collapsing real estate debt had been terminated by its guarantor. Then the private investment platform his executives used to secure contracts went dark. Access revoked. Authority withdrawn. Effective immediately. Adrian began moving before anyone else understood. He crossed the marble floor, leaving Camille beneath the amber chandeliers with her ring hand suspended against her gown. Elena. This time, he did not say her name like an insult. He said it like a man reaching for an elevator after the cables had snapped. Elena turned halfway, one hand still on the cold brass handle. "Restore the authorization," Adrian ordered, pressing the phone to his ear. "Whatever instruction you received, reverse it." The person on the other end spoke long enough for his jaw to tighten. "I am the controlling client," he said. Another pause. "Put your director on." A financial display above the temporary signing desk refreshed. Green figures vanished column by column. Adrian's holding company dropped first. The lending syndicate marked his renewal as canceled. His pending acquisition lost its financing. Red spread across the screen with clinical precision, reflected in the crystal glasses and the polished black piano. Guests stepped away from him as if insolvency carried a temperature. Elena watched without moving. No triumph lifted her mouth. No accusation left it. Adrian ended the call and came toward her, lowering his voice when he saw 3 board members staring. "You cannot cancel my facilities. They were never yours to cancel," Elena said. The sentence was quiet, almost lost beneath the hum of the heating vents. Adrian stopped. For the first time that evening, he looked past her coat and unadorned hands and saw something he had mistaken for absence: control. Camille crossed the room, silk whispering over marble. "Adrian, the chairman, is asking why the bridge financing disappeared." He did not answer her. His attention remained fixed on Elena. "What did you do?" "Exactly what you told me to do." Elena opened the door wider. Snowlight washed the threshold pale blue, dividing the warm ballroom from the dark drive outside. "I left your house." Behind Adrian, the signing representatives closed their leather folders. One banker removed the silver pen prepared for the ceremony. Another instructed his assistant to suspend every linked transaction until ownership and collateral could be verified. Adrian looked toward them, then back at Elena. "If you walk through that door, this becomes permanent." Elena slid one arm into her coat. The wool settled over her shoulders with a soft, final weight. "It already is." She stepped outside, not through the servants' corridor he had expected her to use, but through the mansion's front entrance. Her heels met the stone steps in 4 measured beats. No car waited at the curb, so she walked down the long drive beneath bare trees glazed with frost. Inside, the orchestra remained silent while Adrian stood among extinguished signatures and red screens, discovering that one phone call had not merely interrupted his celebration. It had removed the financial ground beneath it. Then the lead banker approached him with a document still warm from the printer. "Mr. Vale," he said, "before we discuss what remains, we need to establish who actually owns the assets you pledged." Frost sharpened the night air, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke across the empty drive. Halfway to the iron gates, Elena heard the mansion doors close behind her with a muffled, expensive thud. She did not turn. Beneath the wool of her coat, her fingers found a pale ridge along her palm. The scar left by a broken champagne bottle 12 years earlier, on the night she had sold her first company. Back then, there had been no chandeliers. Only a narrow kitchen washed in refrigerator light. Overdue notices spread across a laminate table, and Adrian sitting with both hands locked behind his neck. His first venture had 48 hours before foreclosure. Payroll was already late. "I can fix it," Elena had said. Adrian had lifted his face, exhausted and beautiful in the way desperate men sometimes were. "You always do." By sunrise, she had signed away the software firm she had built from a rented desk and 6 years of sleepless mornings. The sale proceeds cleared Adrian's debt, covered his employees' wages, and gave him the capital to begin again. At the closing office, stale coffee burned beneath fluorescent lights while rain tapped the windows. Adrian had kissed her forehead without reading the transfer documents. "When this works," he whispered, "everyone will know what we built." But when success came, The word we disappeared first. Magazine profiles called him self-made. At galas, he described Elena as private, then traditional, then fortunate. Each word laid another velvet curtain across the woman who had financed the stage. Elena had not corrected him. Instead, on the advice of an independent fiduciary, she placed the remainder of her sale proceeds into a trust beyond either spouse's unilateral control. The documents were signed in her name. The investments grew quietly, while Adrian mistook access for ownership and her restraint for dependence. Years later, seated beside him in the back of a black sedan, Elena had watched him practice a keynote speech on the window's reflection. "People follow certainty," he had said, adjusting his cuff. "They want to believe one man built the impossible." "One man?" she asked. Adrian's eyes had remained on his reflection. "It's cleaner that way." The memory loosened something that had survived the divorce papers, the mistress, and every polished lie told beneath crystal light. Adrian had loved the height. He had loved the applause. He had loved the view from a foundation he never bothered to examine. But he had never loved the hands that poured it. At the gates, Elena stopped beneath a security lamp humming in the cold. She removed her wedding ring from the chain inside her coat. The last remnant she had carried not from longing, but from habit. The gold felt weightless now. She slipped it into an envelope containing the original sale receipt for her company and sealed it with one firm stroke. Then she called her fiduciary. "Open the trust records," Elena said. "Every account, every asset. I want the full valuation by morning." A pause followed, filled by the dry whisper of bare branches. "That will expose how much of Vale Group rests on your capital." Elena looked back once. Through the distant windows, figures moved beneath chandeliers like shadows, trapped inside a jewel box. "I know." Before midnight, a sealed notice reached the mansion. Adrian tore it open beside the marble table where her key still lay. His gaze stopped on the first line, then dropped to the independently verified figure at the bottom, $450 million. For the first time, he understood that Elena had not walked away empty-handed. She had left him standing inside everything her silence had built. By 9 a.m., that fortune would no longer remain where he could reach it. At 8:57 a.m., a brass second hand swept across the silent face of a wall clock, each click crisp against the refrigerated hush of the trust office. Pale winter light lay across the walnut conference table, where 3 authorization packets waited beside a cup of coffee gone cold. Elena sat at the center, her coat folded over the chair behind her, the sealed valuation resting beneath her palm. The verified total filled one clean line, $450 million. Across town, Adrian's name still gleamed above the private banking floor that had treated her fortune as the invisible foundation of his empire. At exactly 9, Elena uncapped a fountain pen. "Transfer every asset," she said. Her fiduciary glanced toward the documents. Moving that much capital at once would trigger reviews, terminate preferred arrangements, and sever the bank's authority over accounts Adrian had used to support his public image. Elena turned the first page. That is the point. Her signature crossed the paper in dark blue ink. One by one, the accounts closed. Bonds, cash reserves, software royalties, real estate holdings, and private equity positions flowed out of the institution Adrian controlled and into a newly chartered entity, Asteria Human Futures Fund. On the monitor, the transfer bar advanced without ceremony. 20%. 43. 78. The low hum of the ventilation system seemed louder as the final digit changed. Completed. Elena's fortune had not disappeared. It had acquired a purpose Adrian could neither borrow nor command. Asteria's first allocations appeared beneath its name. Medical technology for rural clinics, affordable housing in cities where nurses and teachers have been priced out, and expansion capital for companies led by women who had been told their work was too small to matter. Elena approved each mandate herself. No champagne followed. Only the soft tap of keys and the warm paper scent of documents sliding from the printer. At Vale Group headquarters, the consequences arrived less quietly. Adrian entered the boardroom to find every leather chair occupied. Cold blue light from the market display washed over the directors' faces, while his company's stock dropped another 4 points behind him. The chairman pushed a liquidity report across the glass table. The bank has lost the deposits supporting our facilities. Adrian did not touch it. Temporary movement. $450 million is not movement, the chairman said. It is departure. Camille Hart stood near the windows, still wearing the engagement ring Adrian had raised beneath the chandeliers hours earlier. Her phone vibrated. She read the chairman's private message, then slowly lowered her hand. Concern had hardened into a formal demand. Vail Group must explain why its supposedly self-made founder had depended on assets belonging to his ex-wife. Adrian called the bank president. No one transferred him through. He called Elena's fiduciary and received a recorded notice confirming that the institution held no authority over Asteria. Around the table, directors opened the same report in near-perfect sequence, the whisper of paper sounding like cards being dealt at a funeral. Adrian's palm flattened against the glass. She can't deploy that money without creating exposure. The chairman looked at him over silver-rimmed glasses. She already did. The exposure is yours. On the screen, Asteria's public charter went live. Elena's name appeared as founder and sole capital provider, followed by the verified valuation. Reporters began calling before the board had finished reading. The legend Adrian had sold for years, that every tower, acquisition, and patent had risen through his brilliance alone, was cracking in real time. Then the chairman slid one final envelope toward him. You have until noon to prove Vail Group can survive without Elena's capital, he said. The clock above the boardroom door clicked forward. 3 hours remained, and for the first time, Adrian's future depended on money that would no longer answer when he called. The lilies reached the hotel suite before the man, carrying them did. Their waxy white petals shivered beneath the air conditioning, filling the room with a sweet fragrance Elena remembered from anniversaries Adrian's assistant had arranged. At 10:42 a.m., 3 measured knocks sounded against the walnut door. Elena opened it to find Adrian alone, his tie loosened and a cream envelope tucked beneath the bouquet. 10 minutes, he said. She stepped aside without touching the flowers. Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, pale and cold across the limestone floor. Adrian placed the lilies on a glass table and began reading from the letter. The apology had flawless grammar. It mentioned regrettable language, emotional strain, mutual history, and a temporary restoration of liquidity in the interest of stability. Elena listened until the heavy paper stopped trembling between his fingers. Your lawyer writes beautifully, she said. Adrian lowered the page. Vail stock is down 18%. If you issue a statement saying Asteria remains a strategic partner, the market will settle, and your board will believe my money is still available to you. Our employees will believe their jobs are safe. There it was, the blade hidden beneath the ribbon. Elena crossed to the marble desk, where 2 documents waited beside a cooling cup of coffee. One would restore the credit support Adrian needed. The other would place an independent shield around Vail Group's employee pension plan. Adrian reached for the first. Elena covered it with her palm. No, the word landed softly, sharper than a slammed door. I won't rescue your share price, your voting control, or the story you built with my name erased from it. His jaw tightened. Then thousands of people pay for your revenge. Elena turned to the second document. Its pages carried the dry scent of fresh toner, and the final line showed the cost of separating the pension assets from Vail's collapsing financing. $36 million from her personal reserve, unrecoverable once funded. She signed. The pen scratched through the stillness. Adrian stared as she added the date, then pressed her thumb against the encrypted authorization pad. A green light appeared. The pensions are protected, Elena said. Salaried staff, factory workers, retirees. Every vested dollar. His gaze moved from the confirmation screen to the unsigned rescue agreement. But not the company. Not you. By paying the shortfall herself, Elena had removed the employees from his last argument. Their futures no longer stood between him and the consequences of his choices. Adrian folded the lawyer's apology once, then again, crushing its perfect sentences into a narrow strip. You would burn $36 million just to refuse me. Elena lifted the bouquet and placed it outside the suite. I spent it so innocent people wouldn't burn with you. The door closed on the lily's perfume. Behind her, the pension trustees confirmed receipt, while Adrian's phone lit up with the chairman's name and a countdown showing 47 minutes until noon. Then another message appeared on his screen. Without Elena's rescue agreement, the emergency board meeting would proceed, and Adrian would have to answer for every asset he had represented as his own. A television in the hotel sitting room flickered from market charts to Adrian's face beneath a scarlet banner. Vail Group blames vindictive ex-wife for collapse. His recorded statement played over the low hiss of the air conditioner. This is a personal campaign by a bitter former spouse. Elena stood beside the marble counter, the cold edge pressing into her palm. Outside, camera shutters crackled behind the rain-streaked windows. Her phone filled with messages calling her cruel, unstable, destructive. Adrian had lost Elena's money, so he was reaching for her name. A communications advisor closed the linen curtains and placed a prepared denial beside Elena's untouched coffee. We can issue this anonymously through counsel. No records. No questions. Elena read the first sentence, then slid the statement back. If I hide now, he keeps the story. She crossed the curtains and opened them. White camera flashes struck the glass. Privacy had been the last room Adrian could not enter. Elena unlocked the door herself. 10 minutes later, under the hard blue light of the hotel conference room, she faced a row of microphones. There was no jewelry at her throat, no veil of public relations language, only a charcoal suit, a leather document case, and a quiet rasp of paper as she opened it. My former husband says I destroyed what belonged to him, she said. Today, I am placing my financial history under independent review. Reporters stopped whispering. Elena authorized the release of the sale documents from her first software company, 12 years of tax returns, audited trust statements, and every transfer connecting her capital to Vail Group. The files appeared on a public portal as she spoke, each bearing bank seals, dates, and her legal signature. No anonymous source. No voto fortune. No revenge hidden inside accounting smoke. Adrian watched from the rear seat of his town car, where Camille Hart sat rigid beside him. The leather smelled of rain and expensive cologne. On his tablet, the accusation he had launched was being buried beneath verified records. Then the cost of Elena's choice arrived. Her advisor leaned close and whispered that federal regulators had opened a formal inquiry into the trust, the transfer, and every dollar she had earned. Until it closed, her private contracts, addresses, valuations, and years of confidential transactions could be examined. Elena's fingers paused over the authorization screen. One signature would expose the architecture of her entire adult life. Beyond the glass doors, someone shouted a question about her marriage. Another demanded to know whether Adrian had ever controlled the money. She signed. The soft electronic chime sounded louder than the cameras. You may examine all of it, Elena told the room. But examine his representations, too. The inquiry widened at once, no longer confined to her fortune. Regulators issued preservation notices covering Vail Group's asset declarations, loan applications, and collateral schedules. Adrian's phone vibrated with the order just as the elevator carried him toward the emergency board meeting. Camille looked down at the notice, then away from him. At the conference room, 2 federal examiners waited beside the chairman. Between them lay the ownership files Adrian had spent years describing as his own. The chairman pushed the thickest folder toward the empty chair at the head of the table. Sit down, Adrian, he said. Now prove you own what you pledged. The ventilation whispered above the conference table, stirring air chilled to 68 degrees and carrying the bitter scent of untouched coffee. Under the white glare of recessed lights, the federal examiners broke the seals on 3 document cases. Adrian sat rigidly before them, one cuff resting against the thick folder the chairman had pushed across the walnut. Camille Hart remained near the glass wall, her engagement ring flashing whenever red market numbers rolled across the screen behind her. The supporting deeds first, the chairman said. A silver-haired auditor slid a certified record into the center of the table. The Vale residence was purchased 11 years ago for $18.6 million. The funds came from an independent trust established by Elena after the sale of her software company. Adrian loosened his tie. It was our marital home. Occupancy is not ownership. The auditor turned the page. Paper rasped through the silence. Title remained with the trust. No transfer to you was ever executed. The doors opened before Adrian could answer. Elena entered beside her fiduciary, wearing the same dark suit she had faced the cameras in, its will still holding the cold scent of rain. No ladies. No wedding ring. She did not take the empty chair at Adrian's side. She walked to the head of the table and placed her palm on the thickest folder. Her arrival changed nothing in the records. It changed who could no longer hide from them. The next exhibit appeared on the wall. Acquisition dates, patent numbers, and wire confirmations arranged in clean blue columns. The auditor identified 12 core medical device and housing system patents Vale Group had repeatedly listed as company-owned collateral. Every acquisition had been financed through Elena's trust. Licensing agreements granted Vale Group conditional use, not ownership, and required truthful disclosure by its chief executive. Those patents built this company, Adrian said, his voice scraping at the edges. They built its valuation, Elena replied. My capital bought them. Another file opened. The room filled with the soft clicking of a projector and, somewhere below the 42nd floor, the muted pulse of traffic. Share purchases made during Vale Group's 3 liquidity crises appeared one after another. Elena's fund had acquired the voting stock through audited entities, while Adrian publicly called himself self-made. The final ownership chart settled on the screen. 53%. A controlling interest. Camille's hand dropped from Adrian's shoulder. The chairman removed his glasses and set them on the polished wood. You represented the residents, the patent portfolio, and controlling shares as assets under your authority. Elena approved the financing, Adrian said. I approve the use of my money, Elena answered. I never gave him ownership of it. The lead examiner asked whether she could revoke the licenses immediately. Elena looked across the table at the man who had once mistaken her silence for surrender. Under the fraud provisions, yes. Her fiduciary placed the original trust instrument before the board. Its embossed seal caught the light like a blade beneath ice. The auditor delivered the conclusion without raising his voice. Adrian had not supported Elena. Vale Group had operated for years on assets purchased, preserved, and controlled by her independently verified $450 million fortune. Adrian's name had crowned the building. Elena's capital had held it upright. The chairman turned toward him. Your ownership claims are rejected pending the federal review. 2 directors withdrew their proxies from Adrian and transferred them to the independent committee. The digital voting panel changed at once. His controlling block vanished in a row of gray squares. For the first time, the chair beneath him belonged only to the room, not to his authority. Elena closed the folder. She now possessed enough voting power, contractual leverage, and documented cause to take everything Adrian had called his. The chairman placed 2 resolutions before her. One would remove Adrian as CEO, the other would determine who controlled Vale Group afterward. The board recognizes you as the controlling shareholder, he said. What do you intend to do with him? Across the glass, the city gleamed beneath a hard noon sun. Elena picked up the pen. Adrian watched its black tip hover over the first resolution. This time, the decision was hers alone. The pen scratched across the first resolution, a small dry sound beneath the white glare of the boardroom lights. Elena signed once, then slid the page toward the Vale Group chairman. Remove Adrian as chief executive for fraud and unauthorized pledging of trust-controlled assets. No anger sharpened her voice, only finality. The chairman pressed his thumb to the voting console. Green squares spread across the glass panel, one after another, until the result locked with a muted chime. Adrian's name vanished from the executive column. His hand tightened around the polished armrest. You can't run Vale without me. I'm not going to, Elena said. She turned to the second resolution. The paper felt heavy between her fingers, thick cotton stock carrying the power to place every office, patent, and board seat beneath her personal control. Instead, she drew a clean line through the clause naming her sole executive owner. The chairman leaned forward. Camille Hart's diamond ring clicked against the conference table as her hand slipped from Adrian's shoulder. Elena placed a revised document beside the first. Under its terms, voting control would pass into an employee stewardship trust. Engineers, factory workers, administrative staff, and long-serving managers would elect the governing council. Retiree protections would become permanent covenants, untouchable by any future CEO. You would surrender control of the entire company, the chairman said. Beyond the windows, sunlight flashed against steel rooftops, cold and colorless. Elena capped the pen. Control was what corrupted it. Adrian pushed back from the table, the chair wheels rasping over stone. This is punishment dressed up as principle. Elena looked at the Federal Examiner. Proceed with the resident's release. Her fiduciary opened the original trust instrument and placed a second document before Adrian. The cream-colored pages carried the address of the estate where he had hosted his engagement party, the marble halls, the crystal chandeliers, the front door he had ordered Elena to leave through. Ownership had never been his. Sign the waiver, the chairman said, or the board will refer your continued occupancy as an additional misrepresentation during the federal review. For several seconds, only the faint hum of the city reached the room. Adrian stared at the signature line. Then he signed. The stroke began hard and ended thin, as if the ink itself had run out of authority. His access would expire at midnight. No executive office. No controlling vote. No residencia. Camille slowly removed her engagement ring. She set it beside Adrian's revoked credentials, where the diamond caught one sharp blade of light. You told me the house was yours, she said. Adrian reached toward her, but she stepped back before his fingers touched her sleeve. The elevator doors opened with a soft bell. Camille entered alone and did not turn around when they closed. Elena watched neither departure nor collapse. She signed the employee stewardship charter, surrendering the easiest crown she would ever have been offered. The digital panel refreshed. Adrian's portrait disappeared. Elena's temporary control dissolved, and thousands of employee beneficiaries appeared beneath a single line. Ownership transfer, irrevocable. The chairman collected the executed resolutions. The estate must be vacated by midnight. As trustee, you may take possession immediately. A sealed envelope containing the resident's keys waited beside Elena's hand, cool metal pressing through the paper. Adrian looked at it, then at her. For the first time, the question was not whether she could take back the house. It was what she would say when she crossed its threshold and found him there with nowhere left to stand. Midnight rain silvered the estate windows, and the grandfather clock counted down with a brass heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled of extinguished candles and the lilies Adrian had ordered for an engagement party that no longer existed. Elena stepped across the marble threshold with the sealed keys in one hand. Adrian stood beneath the chandelier in shirt sleeves, his tie loose, one suitcase open beside him. Without the portraits, flowers, and staff, the rooms had already stopped pretending he belonged there. You came to watch me leave, he said. Elena closed the door against the cold. I came to take possession. On the console lay the resident's waiver bearing his signature. She placed the keys beside it, metal striking stone with a clean, final click. Adrian's eyes moved toward the staircase. I gave this house 12 years. You occupied it for 12 years. His mouth tightened. Is that distinction supposed to make you feel better? Elena looked at the pale rectangle on the wall where their wedding photograph had once hung. No, it makes the record accurate. At 11:54, headlights swept across the wet windows. The lead federal examiner waited outside to receive the final resident's release, but Elena lifted one finger toward the foyer camera, asking for 6 minutes. Adrian closed his suitcase. The zipper rasped through the silence. Camille left. The board erased me. You gave the company away, so I couldn't even say you did this for power. I did it so no one could build another throne for money that was never theirs. He stared at her, stripped of the polished smile that had once filled magazine covers. Was any of it real? Elena crossed to the marble island and found one surviving lily in a crystal vase. Its petals had browned at the edges. Its perfume was sweet enough to turn stale. She removed it and laid it beside the waver. What I gave was real. What you believed you were entitled to was not. Adrian's hand settled on the suitcase handle, then released it. If I had known the fortune was yours, you knew I was yours, she said softly. That should have been enough. The clock moved to 11:58. Rain ticked against the glass. Adrian glanced around the foyer, as if the carved staircase, walnut paneling, and warm amber lamps might speak on his behalf. Nothing did. Elena opened the front door. Cold air crossed the marble, carrying the scent of wet cedar. Call the examiner, Adrian muttered. Have them escort me out. No. She stepped aside, leaving an unobstructed path to the rain. You order me out when you thought silence meant dependence. I'm not borrowing your cruelty now. His face shifted, the last defense falling away. Elena held his gaze and gave the words their rightful weight. Leave my house. Adrian flinched, not at their volume, but at their truth. He lifted the suitcase himself and crossed the threshold without guards, applause, or Camille's hand on his arm. At midnight, Elena instructed the lead federal examiner to complete the release. The estate gates opened, Adrian's car disappeared into the rain, and legal possession returned to the woman who had paid for every stone. Elena locked the door, removed the dead lily, and opened the curtains to the first pale line of morning. She had not taken back a husband, an empire, or the years he wasted. She had taken back the right to decide what entered her life and what had to leave.